Full Gear is usually my favorite AEW pay-per-view. I don't know if it's the time of the year or just the fact that up until this year, this was always AEW's last pay-per-view of the year. For some reason, I love Full Gear season more than others. Let's address the elephant in the room. I've been pretty critical of AEW over the past few months, and maybe I'm just an entitled mark. Then again, I remember that this is the same company that put on shows like All Out 2021 and Revolution 2020, and I'm reminded as to why I hold them to such a high standard. The thing is, my problems have mostly been with things on AEW TV, not pay-per-views. No matter what kind of creative rut AEW is going through, we always know one thing. The pay-per-views will never miss. Well, except for All Out 2020, but we don't talk about that show. Anyway, when it comes to high caliber of professional wrestling, look no further than AEW pay-per-views. At the end of the day, AEW is still a company that focuses on in-ring skill and delivering amazing matches more so than any other promotion in America. With that being said, outside of one match, every match on the main card had a story that had been building up for weeks. I don't know what the general consensus is, but heading into this pay-per-view, I was extra excited due to the multi-week build for nearly every match. This might go down as one of the better built AEW pay-per-views ever in all honesty. But enough about that. How was the show itself? That's why you're here, right? I think a lot of you might be surprised by some of the things that I have to say about this show. So sit back and relax as I give you my thoughts on Full Gear 2023. This is one where I actually have to talk about what happened on the pre-show. On the last match on Full Gear 0 Hour, we saw MJF and a stand-in Samoa Joe defending the ROH tag titles against Bullet Club Gold's The Guns. We saw Samoa Joe and a surprise appearance from Adam Cole still on crutches help MJF retain the tag titles. But after the match, MJF was attacked by the Guns with a steel chair where they repeatedly aimed for his leg. This apparently deemed MJF medically unable to compete as he was stretchered off onto an ambulance where he begged Adam Cole to not let Jay White take his world title. Pretty huge angle to run on the pre-show, and you'll get my full thoughts on it as we get through this review. The actual pay-per-view, emanating from the Forum in LA in front of nearly 13,000 fans, kicked off with a huge match. We saw the trio of Adam Copeland, Darby Allin, and Sting taking on Christian Cage, Luchasaurus, and Nick Wayne. The Patriarchy. Christian's entrance with the children's choir singing his theme might have been the single greatest thing I've ever seen, by the way. This was a great match to start off the show, the universally beloved fan favorites taking on the slimy heels. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the first time that Sting has ever opened up in AEW pay-per-view. For good reason, he's on his farewell tour, which I can't talk about for too long without getting emotional. Anyway, Darby took a beating as he always does, and we saw Christian Cage avoiding his lifelong friend Adam Copeland throughout the entirety of the match. They're clearly still building anticipation for that eventual one-on-one. In the end, Christian Cage ran off into the crowd instead of facing his friend, and it allowed the faces to all hit their finishers on Luchasaurus for the win. Great match where every man got a chance to shine and put the pay-per-view off to a great start. I really liked Darby getting on the mic after the match and truly letting it be known that this is Sting's last match in California. His partners left the ring while Sting stood in the middle of it soaking in the ovation. Tears, man. And oh yeah, Ric Flair was in Sting's corner. Up next, we had a segment during the pay-per-view, which is usually rare for AEW pay-per-views. Atop the ramp, we saw Tony Schiavone welcome out Jay White. Tony says MJF is medically unable to compete for the world title in the main event, and therefore by default, your new AEW World Champion is now Jay, and Adam Cole's music hits. Cole basically tells Jay he made a promise to Max and he's not letting him leave with the world title, so he'll defend MJF's title for him in crutches and all. Jay references the concussion Cole got at Forbidden Door during the match last year and accepts. The new pay-per-view main event is now Adam Cole versus Jay White for the AEW World title. Alright, here are my thoughts. How the hell is MJF deemed medically unable to compete, but Adam Cole, fresh off surgery, walking on crutches, isn't? I get what they were going for, and I knew Max would still come back later in the night too, but it's a strange decision with a giant plot hole regardless. This was just the beginning of unnecessary last-minute overbooking for the main event, which I'll get into later. The second match of the night saw Orange Cassidy defend his international title against an old foe, Jon Moxley. These two had a lot to live up to after their fantastic first match at All Out this year, which I called one of the best AEW pay-per-view main events ever. The story for the first match saw Mox questioning OC's plays as a wrestler. This match saw Mox questioning OC's plays as a champion. This was a very good match that felt like a title match, just two guys wanting to beat the crap out of each other. Most of it saw Moxley dominating OC until the big babyface comeback. And while it didn't live up to the hype of the first one, it didn't need to. Orange Cassidy conquered the one man who ended his historic first reign as international champion. It took all he had, a record 5 orange punches with a beach break to take out Jon Moxley, but OC did it. He retained. Orange Cassidy doesn't really need a long reign this time around. His story was with Moxley, and he beat him as clean as beating Moxley gets. We'll see what's next for both men. The third match was the AEW Women's World Title match between champion Hikaru Shida and timeless Toni Storm. Honestly, considering the caliber of performers in this match and the fantastic matches they've had over the past year, I expected this one to be better. It wasn't even bad, these two are too good to even have a bad match, it was just okay. It also had the expected outcome of Toni Storm becoming a 3-time AEW Women's World Champion. The ending with the metallic tin used to cheat being clearly visible through Toni's tights took it down a notch. I'm also surprised Mariah May stayed uninvolved. I thought she was going to help Toni win the title. Would have been better than what we got. Anyway, the most over character in the women's division now holds the world title, which makes sense. But you can't help but feel for Shida, who has once again been handed a short reign in front of fans. Then we had maybe my second favorite match of the night, the insane 4-way ladder match for the tag titles. Ricky and Big Bill fought for their lives trying to retain against FTR, LFI, and Kings of the Black Throne. This match was simply awesome, and yet again somehow every man had a chance to shine. I can honestly say that this is one of my favorite ladder matches that I've ever seen. It was exactly what it needed to be, pure chaos that felt like it had stakes. The Gonzo bomb that Brody hit on Dralistico through the ladder was utterly insane. Also, low-key loved this match a little extra because it involved all the day one Collision guys just showing out. Honestly, any team could have won this and I would have been okay with it, and in the end, it was the champions that retained. I don't know about you guys, but I'm loving this Ricky and Big Bill partnership more than I ever knew I would. They still have gas in the tank, so I'm interested to see who they face next. As for the others, I hope one or two of them enter the Continental Classic. The fifth match on the main card saw Chris Statlander defend her TBS title against Julia Hart and Sky Blue in a 3-way match. The fact that this match had people chanting "This is awesome" and the crowd engaged throughout, especially after the ladder match, is a testament to these three competitors. This was yet another match that had been built over the past couple of weeks. Julia Hart obviously corrupted Sky Blue with the Black Mist to the point where Sky finally got new entrance music while ditching the hat for a crown. The storyline is still a little too spooky for my taste, but I'm glad there's been an active women's storyline for the TBS title at all. Chris had retained against Julia at the previous pay-per-view, but this time she had to fight off two spooky characters at once. I'll straight up say it, this outdid the women's world title match, and it wasn't even close either. This was a fun match that saw Chris lose her belt without even getting pinned. Julia Hart stole the victory from Stat by pinning a defeated Sky Blue to become TBS champion and the youngest champion in AEW history. Yet another case of a homegrown AEW talent becoming a fan favorite and working their way up from dark to champion. This was the right call. Stat had a good run with the belt, but it was Julia's time. Chris can now move up to the women's world title scene while Julia feuds with the likes of Sky, Red Velvet, and those who aren't quite at the world title level just yet. This was a good match with the right result, and it led perfectly into what we were about to witness next. Before our next match, we had the reveal for the big free agent signing, and as widely expected, it was Will Ospreay. Will got a superstar ovation, which proves that this announcement was worth the hype. Any company signing Ospreay was going to be a huge deal. It just so happens that he chose AEW despite interest from WWE. Will revealed that he'll still finish up his commitments with New Japan, but he'll be full-time with AEW on the road to Revolution. A huge signing, especially weeks before all-in tickets go on sale. The dream matches are endless. But then we got easily my match of the night and one of my favorite AEW matches of all time. The Texas Death Match between Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page. Where do I begin? I expected this to be violent, we all did. What I didn't expect was for this to be as unhinged as it was. But this is professional wrestling. If you don't watch wrestling to see two men who hate each other trying to permanently hurt the other, then why do you watch? Do you watch for the story? Because this match had that too. This is exactly the type of match that needed to happen after Swerve broke into Hangman's home and got near his kid. No lockups, no wrestling. This was a literal fight and both men were not afraid to cross any boundaries. From both men using the staple gun on each other to Swerve using it on himself, there was glass, barbed wire, cinder blocks, you name it. Nothing I say can do this match justice unless you see it for yourself. One of the things I'll never forget was Hangman opening his mouth wide to allow the blood that was literally dripping from Swerve's skull straight into his mouth, then spitting it out Triple H style. To a much lesser violent degree, another one of my favorite spots in the match was when Prince Nana pulled a nearly defeated Swerve out of the ring onto his feet and doing the dance. The crowd was hot, emotions were high, and this is why I love professional wrestling. I wouldn't have loved this match any less had the result been the opposite of what I wanted, but instead we got the only correct result. Swerve pulled a page out of Hangman's book and choked him out with a chain in similar fashion that Hangman did to Moxley earlier this year. Despite once again getting help from outside sources, Swerve defeated Hangman Page, a former AEW World Champion, 2 pay-per-views in a row. And now it seems all but inevitable that he's destined for the top prize in AEW. Shout out to Swerve, shout out to Hangman, shout out to Prince Nana, shout out to AEW. It's so funny to me that in 2023, I enjoy Hangman's work so much more when he's not involved with the Elite. This guy on his own is just incredible, and frankly, I think a lot of the Elite melodrama stuff these days is beneath him. He needs top-level feuds like this on his own consistently. His feud with Moxley pre-Elite reunion was incredible, and this feud post-Elite reunion is even better. Hot take, but I'd be perfectly okay if we never see the Elite interact again for a few years after this pay-per-view, because I simply enjoy them much more in AEW when they're all doing their own thing, which is a perfect segue into the next match, Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho versus the Young Bucks. Anyone was gonna have a hard time following the Texas Death Match, but man, this just amplified my belief that the Elite need to go their own separate ways. Back in 2020, this would have hit hard, but now, I simply don't care. I've seen this story before, just without Jericho. I want to see Kenny doing his own thing in the Continental Classic. I want to see the Young Bucks go beyond just another heel turn. I need them to reinvent themselves because they've been playing the same characters for far too long, as both heels and faces. And Jericho, he just needs a break. To everyone's credit, they did eventually get the crowd's energy back up, but man, we only have so much time left with Kenny at a top level, and it pains me that most of his 2023 pay-per-view matches were either tag or trios matches. I get that that might be out of choice, but only 2 singles matches on pay-per-view this year is unfortunate. This match wasn't even bad, in fact it was pretty good by the time it was over. It's more that I didn't care, and that's a problem when a day one Elite fan is saying it. If you guys thought I was harsh on the last match, then you might want to end this video here. The main event saw Jay White challenge for the world title against MJF. No wait, Adam Cole. No wait, MJF again. Come on guys, it was predictable that MJF would be back to make this Super Cena-esque return. My only question is why? This was the definition of unnecessary. Why couldn't we have just had a straight up classic AEW pay-per-view main event? A classic wrestling match without all the overbooking? Why have Jay White look so weak, so stupid by losing to a one-legged MJF even after getting help from the Guns? Before you misconstrue my words in the comments, my problem isn't that Jay White lost. I expected him to lose the second he stole Max's title. My problem is how weak they made him look in this defeat. If we didn't have the whole injury angle and Max just proved to be the better man, then I think I would have loved this match. Instead, we got very WWE style booking that I would have called dumb had they did it, and now I'm calling it dumb here. And yes, I know that he was emulating Sting at Clash of Champions 17, but Sting lost that match in 4 minutes. Maybe I'm in the minority and that's fine, but MJF's title reign is borderline overstaying its welcome since the face turn. Yes, I realize that I praised his face turn at first, but as most of my videos tend to do, it's aged like milk. I myself on this channel have long praised MJF for his genius moments over the past few years, so I also gotta call out when he's doing too much. I hate to make the comparison, but this main event felt like peak Codyverse. Again, my problem isn't that MJF won, it's the unnecessary storyline that they added in order for him to beat the odds. And I'm not being fickle, I'm still a fan of MJF and think he's one of the best wrestlers in the world, I just didn't like what he did on this night. As for Jay White, I hope he enters another big feud after this instead of just waiting on the sidelines. There's a handful of wrestlers coming after MJF as we head into World's End, and I just hope that we get a more classic anti-hero MJF for this pay-per-view cycle instead of a stereotypical babyface MJF. But despite a main event that was unnecessarily overbooked, I still enjoyed this pay-per-view. Would I rank this as one of the best AEW pay-per-views of all time? Probably not, and that's okay. I think the main event would keep it out of my top 5 for the year, but there were matches on this card that will be a lot of fun to rewatch for years to come. The strange part was no sign of the devil, but World's End seems like a much more fitting time and place. It was a good pay-per-view nonetheless, and I'm now excited for the Continental Classic and the build for World's End. Hey Siri, play The End by The Doors.